It's a rainy night, and a chef goes out to check on a strange noise behind his restaurant. Instead of a stray cat, he finds a 4-year-old girl holding 2 babies under a soggy blanket, shivering. Hook, what shocking secret will a mysterious phone call reveal hours later? Hours later, his phone rings, a shaky voice asks, "Are they safe? Who's calling? Where are you listening from today? Let me know in the comments, and then stick around for this amazing story from African Legacy Tales." The sound of rain against the kitchen window couldn't mask the gentle whimpers coming from the alley behind Marcus Antie's restaurant. At first, he thought it was just another stray cat. There were plenty in this part of downtown Portland, but something about the cry seemed different, more urgent. Marcus wiped his hands on his apron and stepped away from the pot of simmering beef bourguignon that had occupied his attention for the past 4 hours. "I'll be right back," he called to his sous chef, Renata. "Watch the sauce." The moment he opened the back door, the sounds became clearer. These weren't the mews of hungry cats, they were the unmistakable cries of infants. Marcus's heart began to race as he rushed into the rain-soaked alley, his chef's clogs splashing through puddles. There, behind a stack of produce crates, he found them, 3 children huddled together under a threadbare blanket. A black girl, perhaps 3 years old, was holding 2 tiny white infants close to her chest, trying to shield them from the rain. The sight stopped Marcus in his tracks. 20 years of running one of Portland's most acclaimed restaurants had prepared him for many things, but nothing like this. The older girl looked up at him with eyes that held both fear and desperate hope. She was soaked to the bone, yet her primary concern seemed to be protecting the babies in her arms. "It's okay," Marcus said softly, kneeling down despite the rain soaking through his chef's pants. "I'm here to help." The girl didn't speak, but her grip on the infants tightened. Marcus noticed a crumpled piece of paper tucked into the blanket. With trembling fingers, he carefully extracted it, trying to protect the writing from the rain. The note was brief and heartbreaking: "Please take care of them, I can't anymore." Marcus had always worked with precision and purpose in his kitchen, every move calculated, every decision measured, but at this moment, looking at these 3 abandoned children, his carefully ordered world tilted on its axis. He knew he should call the police immediately, but something held him back. Perhaps it was the way the little girl's eyes seemed to plead with him, or how the twins, who couldn't have been more than a few months old, had fallen quiet at his presence. Without hesitation, he shrugged off his chef's coat and wrapped it around the children. "Let's get you inside where it's warm," he said, carefully gathering all 3 in his arms. The girl allowed him to pick them up, though her eyes remained wary. As Marcus carried them through the back door of his restaurant, he could hear the usual dinner service chaos, the clatter of pots, the sizzle of pans, the calls of order up, but for the first time in his 20-year career, the kitchen wasn't his primary concern. "Renata," he called out, his voice cutting through the kitchen noise, "cancel my dinner service, family emergency." The sous chef turned, her eyes widening at the sight of her boss cradling 3 children. What's going on?" "I don't know yet," Marcus replied, his mind racing with possibilities and implications, "but I do know these children need help, and right now, we're all they've got." What Marcus couldn't know, was that his decision to step into that alley would set in motion a chain of events that would change not only his life but the lives of everyone connected to these mysterious children. As he carried them up to his apartment above the restaurant, the little girl finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper, "Are you going to send us away?" The question hung in the air like steam in a kitchen, and Marcus found himself facing a decision that would challenge everything he thought he knew about family, responsibility, and the unexpected ingredients that make up a life worth living. Marcus's apartment above the restaurant had always felt perfectly sized for a single man devoted to his craft. Now, with 3 children huddled on his leather couch, it seemed impossibly small. The little girl, who had finally told him her name was Jewel, sat protectively between the twin infants, her dark eyes taking in every detail of their new environment. The first few hours were a blur of practical necessities. Renata, his sous chef, had rushed to the nearby convenience store for diapers and formula, while Marcus called his sister, Blossom, a pediatric nurse, for urgent advice. The twins, both boys, appeared to be about 3 months old and miraculously seemed healthy despite their ordeal. "Marcus, you need to call the police," Blossom insisted over the phone, her voice tight with concern. "This isn't like deciding what sauce goes with the fish special, these are children." I know, Marcus replied, watching as Jewel carefully helped him feed one of the twins with the bottle Blossom had taught him to prepare. "But you should see them, Blossom, the way she takes care of them. Someone taught her to do this. There's a story here, and I can't just, what? You're a chef, not a social worker, what's your plan here?" It was a fair question, one that had been nagging at him since he'd carried the children upstairs. Marcus had always lived by a clear system of order and preparation, mise en place, as they called it in the kitchen, everything in its place, every step planned out. But now, looking at these 3 vulnerable children, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the pure instinct to protect, to nurture. That evening, as the restaurant below hummed with the usual dinner service sounds, Marcus found himself creating a different kind of sustenance. He warmed some chicken soup, his grandmother's recipe, and watched in amazement as Jewel helped feed herself and kept an eye on the twins, whom he'd settled into makeshift beds made from kitchen prep baskets lined with clean tablecloths. "Jewel," he said gently, sitting across from her at his small kitchen table, "can you tell me anything about how you got to my restaurant, about your mommy or daddy?" The girl's face clouded, and she clutched her soup spoon tighter. "Lady said stay quiet, Lady said new family coming." Her voice trembled slightly, "But Lady didn't come back." Marcus felt his chest tighten. "And the babies, are they your brothers?" Jewel shook her head. "Lady brought them too, said we stay together." She looked up at Marcus, her eyes suddenly fierce with determination. "We stay together." As if on cue, one of the twins began to fuss. Before Marcus could move, Jewel was already up, moving to comfort the baby with practiced ease. The scene struck him deeply, this tiny girl, barely more than a baby herself, acting as a guardian to 2 even smaller children. Later that night, after the children had finally fallen asleep, Jewel on the couch and the twins in their makeshift beds, Marcus sat at his kitchen counter staring at his phone. The right thing to do was clear: call the authorities, let the proper channels take over, but something held him back. Maybe it was the way Jewel had looked at him when she'd finally accepted a change of clothes, one of his t-shirts that hung on her like a dress, or perhaps it was how naturally she had fit into his evening routine, helping him clean up after their meal with the same careful attention he demanded in his professional kitchen. His finger hovered over the phone's keypad when it suddenly lit up with an incoming call. The number was unfamiliar, with an area code he didn't recognize. Marcus's heart began to race as he answered, "Hello?" The voice on the other end was quiet, controlled, but tinged with an urgency that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. "Are they safe?" Marcus looked toward the sleeping children, his free hand gripping the counter's edge. "Who is this, please?" The voice continued, ignoring his question. "I need to know if they're safe. The 3 children, are they with you?" Before Marcus could respond, he heard what sounded like a struggle on the other end, followed by a sharp intake of breath. The voice returned, now rushed and frightened. "Listen carefully, don't trust anyone who comes looking for them, not until..." The line went dead. Marcus stared at his phone, his mind racing. The mysterious call had just transformed what seemed like a case of desperate abandonment into something far more complex. As he looked at the sleeping children, he realized he was now part of a story much bigger and potentially more dangerous than he had imagined. In the quiet of his apartment, broken only by the soft breathing of 3 innocent children, Marcus Antie made a decision that would forever change the course of not only his life but theirs as well. Whatever was going on, whoever these children were, he would protect them, but first, he needed to understand exactly what and who he was protecting them from. The next morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn sunshine that usually energized Marcus for a busy day in the kitchen. Instead, he found himself facing an entirely different kind of challenge. After a night of fitful sleep, interrupted by the twins crying and his own racing thoughts, he knew he needed help, and fast. His sister, Blossom, arrived early, medical bag in hand, her face a mixture of concern and barely contained frustration. "I can't believe you haven't called the authorities yet," she whispered as she examined the twins in the living room, Julia watching from the corner, her dark eyes never leaving the babies. "But since you're being stubborn, at least let me make sure they're healthy." The examination revealed what Marcus had hoped. Despite their ordeal, all three children were in relatively good health. The twins were well fed and showed no signs of neglect. Jewel, though thin, was clean and obviously well cared for before their abandonment. "Someone loved these children," Blossom concluded, packing away her stethoscope. "This wasn't a case of long-term neglect. Whatever happened, it happened suddenly." Marcus nodded, thinking about the mysterious phone call from the night before. He hadn't told Blossom about it yet, unsure of how much to share, but as he watched his sister interact with the children, her professional demeanor softening as Jewel helped her pack her medical supplies, he knew he needed to confide in someone. "There's something else," he began, but was interrupted by a knock at his apartment door. Everyone froze. Jewel instantly grabbed both twins, pulling them closer to her on the couch. The knock came again, more insistent this time. "Mr. Antie," a woman's voice called through the door, "this is Detective Florence Martinez from Portland PD. We need to speak with you." Marcus's heart raced as he remembered the warning from the mysterious caller: "Don't trust anyone who comes looking for them." He glanced at Blossom, who was already moving toward the door. "Wait," he whispered, grabbing her arm, "something's not right." "Marcus," Blossom hissed, "it's the police, you have to open the door." But years of running a restaurant in downtown Portland had made Marcus familiar with the local police force. He'd never heard of Detective Martinez, and something about the voice seemed off, too rehearsed, too perfect. He approached the door carefully. "Do you have a warrant, Detective?" There was a pause, just a fraction too long. "No, sir, we received an anonymous tip about children in your care. We're here to ensure their safety." Marcus's instinct screamed danger. In one fluid motion, he turned to Blossom and mouthed, "Take them out the back." His sister's eyes widened, but years of their childhood's secret signals kicked in. She nodded and quietly began gathering the children. "Just a moment, Detective," Marcus called through the door, "let me get dressed." The response was immediate and alarming. The door handle jiggled violently, and a man's voice, definitely not a police officer's, muttered something in the hallway. Marcus moved quickly, helping Blossom guide Jewel and the twins toward the apartment's back exit, a fire escape he'd never been more grateful for. As Blossom helped Jewel through the window, one of the twins began to cry. The pounding on the front door intensified. "Mr. Antie, open this door immediately." "Go," Marcus whispered urgently to Blossom, "take them to your place, I'll handle this." Blossom hesitated for a split second, then nodded. With practiced efficiency from her years of handling infants, she secured the twins in her arms while Jewel clung to her back. They disappeared down the fire escape just as the front door burst open. Two people rushed in, a woman in a cheap business suit that was definitely not a police uniform and a man in dark clothes who moved with dangerous purpose. They took in the empty apartment, the woman's face contorting with anger when she spotted the open window. "Where are they?" she demanded, her fake police persona dropping completely. Marcus stood his ground, his chef's stance solid and unmovable. "I don't know what you're talking about, but since you've broken into my home, I'm calling the real police." The man moved toward Marcus menacingly, but the woman held up her hand. "We don't have time, they couldn't have gone far." She fixed Marcus with a cold stare. "This isn't over, Mr. Antie, those children, they're more important than you know." They left as quickly as they had entered, leaving Marcus alone in his violated home. The moment they were gone, he pulled out his phone with shaking hands and made 2 calls, first to the actual police to report the break-in, and then to Blossom. "We're safe," his sister assured him, "at my place." "But Marcus, what have you gotten yourself into?" Looking at his broken door, Marcus wished he knew the answer. The mysterious call, the fake detective, the violent intrusion, all of it pointed to something far more sinister than abandoned children, but one thing was becoming crystal clear: whoever these children were, someone was desperate to find them. As he waited for the real police to arrive, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Thank you for protecting them. Meet me tomorrow, 10 a.m., Pioneer Square. Come alone, I'll explain everything." Marcus stared at the message, his chef's instincts for timing and precision warring with his growing protective feelings for 3 children he'd known less than 24 hours. Whatever secrets surrounded these children, he was now undeniably part of their story, and tomorrow, he might finally learn why. Pioneer Square was bustling with its usual morning crowd, office workers clutching coffee cups, tourists consulting their phones, and street vendors setting up their carts. Marcus sat on a bench, his chef's jacket replaced by a casual sweater, trying to look relaxed while his eyes scanned every passing face. He'd spent a sleepless night at Blossom's apartment, taking turns with his sister to watch over the children and jumping at every sound. Jewel had barely spoken since their hasty escape, but her actions said everything. She'd positioned herself between the twins' makeshift cribs and the apartment door, refusing to sleep until exhaustion finally overtook her. The sight had broken Marcus's heart and strengthened his resolve to understand what these children had been through. At exactly 10 a.m., a woman in hospital scrubs sat down beside him. She kept her eyes forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "The girl, Jewel, does she still hum when she's helping with the babies?" Marcus's breath caught. "Yes, a lullaby I don't recognize." The woman's shoulders relaxed slightly. "My mother used to sing it to me. I taught it to Jewel when she helped in the nursery." She finally turned to look at him, her face lined with exhaustion and worry. "I'm Dr. Susan Johnson. I was there when the twins were born." Over the next 30 minutes, Dr. Johnson revealed a story that made Marcus's complex kitchen disasters seem trivial in comparison. She worked at a small private hospital that had been infiltrated by a sophisticated adoption scheme. Desperate parents-to-be were paying enormous sums to jump waiting lists and bypass regulations. Some of the children, like the twins, were being taken from mothers who had been coerced or deceived. Jewel was different, Dr. Johnson explained, her voice catching. She was already in the system, supposed to be adopted by a local family, but she bonded with the twins while helping in the nursery. She has a gift with babies. When I discovered what was really happening at the hospital, I couldn't separate them, I had to get them out. The people who came to my apartment, brokers, they've invested too much money to let this exposure risk their operation." She handed him a thick envelope, birth certificates, medical records, everything you need to protect them legally. "The twins' mother," she paused, composing herself, "she died shortly after giving birth, complications they didn't treat in time because she was threatening to keep her babies." Marcus felt the weight of the envelope and the responsibility it represented in his hands. "Why me? Why my restaurant? I've eaten at your restaurant for years. I've seen how you treat people, your staff, your customers, even the homeless people who gather in the alley. You have a good heart, Mr. Antie, and more importantly, you have the resources to protect them." She stood up, her eyes darting around the square. "The police are already investigating the hospital, but the brokers are well connected. They'll keep trying to get the children back." "What about Jewel's adoptive family, the ones who were supposed to take her?" Dr. Johnson's face darkened. "They were part of it. They were going to use her as a practice child while waiting for a white infant. She deserved better than that." Before Marcus could respond, Dr. Johnson stiffened. "Don't turn around. One of them just entered the square." She pressed a key into his hand. "Safety deposit box at Pioneer Trust Bank. Everything else you need is there, including evidence against the brokers. If anything happens to me, Dr. Johnson, Susan, my name is Susan." She managed a small smile. "Take care of them, Mr. Antie. They need someone who will see them as people, not products." She walked away quickly, disappearing into the crowd, just as Marcus glimpsed a man in dark clothes, the same one from his apartment, moving through the square with purpose. His phone buzzed with a text from Blossom. "Jewel's asking for you, twins getting fussy." Marcus stood up, tucking the envelope securely inside his jacket. As he walked toward his car, his mind was already racing with plans. He'd need to renovate the apartment above the restaurant, hire more staff to cover his kitchen duties, contact his lawyer about adoption procedures. The practical challenges were daunting, but for the first time in his life, the precise measurements and timings of his culinary world seemed less important than the messier, more complex ingredients of building a family. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Renata, his sous chef. Health inspector showed up demanding full audit, says there was a complaint. Marcus's jaw tightened. The brokers were sending a message. They could disrupt his life, his business, everything he'd built. But as he thought of Jules' protective embrace of the twins, her quiet humming, her watchful eyes, he knew he wouldn't back down. He'd created something from nothing before, building his restaurant from a rundown space into a beloved local institution. He could do it again, this time building something even more precious, a family. He called Blossom. "I'm on my way, but first I need to stop at the bank," he paused, then added, "and call our lawyer. Tell her I want to start adoption proceedings for all three of them." The silence on the other end lasted only a moment before Blossom replied, "Finally, I was wondering when you'd realize you had already made that decision." As Marcus drove toward the bank, he found himself humming Jules' lullaby. He didn't know the words, but he understood its meaning, a promise of safety, of belonging, of love, and like any good chef, he intended to keep his promises, no matter how difficult the recipe might be. The safety deposit box contained enough evidence to make Marcus's hands shake as he reviewed its contents in the bank's private room: photos, documents, emails, a paper trail of corruption that stretched from his local hospital to adoption agencies across state lines. But what caught his attention was a small USB drive labeled simply "Insurance." That was 3 weeks ago. Now, sitting in his lawyer's office with Blossom beside him, Marcus felt the weight of everything he'd learned pressing down on him. The twins, now officially named Daniel and Louis in his emergency custody application, were with his trusted prep cook, Donna, who had immediately volunteered to help with childcare. Jewel was at her first session with a child psychologist, accompanied by Blossom. The good news, Florence Antie explained, no relation, though the shared surname had sparked an immediate connection, is that the emergency custody order is solid. Dr. Johnson's documentation was thorough, and her testimony to the police last week helps your case significantly. His lawyer shuffled through papers on her desk. The challenging part is the adoption. There will be questions about your suitability as a single father, your work schedule, your sudden involvement with these children. And the bad news? Marcus asked, recognizing the look on Florence's face, the same look he got when a supplier was about to tell him his favorite truffles weren't available. Someone's contesting the custody arrangement, a couple from Seattle claiming they had a prior adoption agreement for Jewel. They have paperwork that looks legitimate at first glance. Marcus's fists clenched. The brokers most likely, they're trying to establish a legal foothold. Florence leaned forward. But there's something else you should know. We found Dr. Johnson's car abandoned at the airport this morning. Her phone's been disconnected. It looks like she's gone into hiding. Marcus thought about the doctor's words in Pioneer Square. If anything happens to me, he pulled out his phone, showing Chambers a series of photos he'd taken of additional documents from the safety deposit box. She left a backup plan, names, dates, account numbers, everything needed to prove the corruption of the hospital. She knew they might come after her. Chambers studied the photos intently. This helps, but it also means you and the children need protection. We can arrange a crash. From the kitchen, interrupted them, followed by Donna's startled cry. Marcus was moving before he consciously registered the sound, Chambers right behind him. They burst into the kitchen to find Donna standing protectively in front of the children, facing a man Marcus had never seen before, but Jewel had. Her scream of recognition made Marcus's blood run cold. "That's him," she cried, clutching the twins' carriers, "the man who took us from the hospital." The stranger's hand was moving toward his jacket when Chambers' gun appeared. "Police, hands where I can see them." As Chambers handcuffed the intruder, Marcus gathered his children close, feeling Jewel's trembling subside as he held her. The twins, amazingly, had slept through the entire incident. Looking at their peaceful faces, Marcus made a decision. "Detective," he said, his voice steady despite his racing heart, "I think it's time to use everything on that USB drive, all of it. These people want to play hardball. Let's show them how we do things in my kitchen." The next 48 hours transformed Marcus's restaurant into an unlikely command center. Detective Chambers had arranged for plainclothes officers to pose as customers while Marcus Antie worked with federal prosecutors to prepare the case against the adoption brokers. The USB drive had revealed a network more extensive than anyone had imagined, with connections to 3 different hospitals and dozens of compromised adoption cases. But for Marcus, the most difficult moment came when he had to temporarily close his restaurant. His staff gathered in the dining room, their faces concerned as he explained the situation. "I know this affects all of you," he said, looking at the people who had become his second family over the years. "I'll continue paying your wages, but I understand if you need to look for other work." Renata, his sous chef of 8 years, stepped forward. "Are you kidding? We're not going anywhere, boss." She glanced at the others who nodded in agreement. "Those kids up there, they're family now, and this restaurant, it's not just a business, it's home." Donna, who had become the children's primary caregiver when Marcus was dealing with legal matters, wiped tears from her eyes. "Besides," she added with a warm smile, "Jewel is already better at rolling pasta than half our line cooks." The laughter that followed was interrupted by Blossom bursting through the door, her face pale. "Marcus, turn on the news now." The local news station was running a breaking story about allegations of corruption at multiple hospitals' maternity wards, but what made Marcus's heart stop was the grainy surveillance footage they were showing. Dr. Susan Johnson being forced into a car 3 days ago. "Police are investigating the disappearance of Dr. Susan Johnson," the reporter announced, "a key witness in what appears to be a multi-state adoption trafficking operation. Dr. Johnson was last seen." Marcus's phone rang. "Detective Chambers, we found her, she's alive, but she needs medical attention. They were holding her in a private clinic outside the city. We're moving in now, but," he paused, "Marcus, they know we're coming. Some of them might try to tie up loose ends. I'm sending officers to your location." Before Marcus could respond, the restaurant's lights went out. In the sudden darkness, he heard Jewel scream from upstairs, "Papa, Papa, help!" Marcus was moving before anyone could stop him, taking the stairs 2 at a time. He could hear his staff calling the police, Blossom shouting his name, but nothing mattered except reaching his children. The emergency lights cast an eerie glow in the stairwell as he burst through the door to his apartment. The scene that greeted him made his blood run cold. The woman who had posed as Detective Martinez stood by the window, her arm around Jewel. A man Marcus recognized from the surveillance footage as one of the hospital administrators was holding the twins' carriers. "Stay back, Mr. Antie," the woman ordered. "We're taking them somewhere safe, somewhere they can be with more suitable families." "Papa," Jewel whimpered, her small hand reaching toward him. In that moment, Marcus understood what people meant when they talked about parental instinct. Every skill he'd learned in the kitchen, timing, precision, the ability to move without hesitation, crystallized into perfect clarity. "You know what I've learned from 20 years of running a kitchen," he said calmly, taking a deliberate step forward. "The most important ingredient in any recipe isn't the most expensive one, it's love." Another step: you see these children as commodities, price tags, products to be sold. "Don't be naive," the administrator snapped. "Do you know how much people will pay for healthy infants, for a child like Jewel trained to help care for them? This is business." "No," Marcus replied, his voice hard, "this is family." The moment the words left his mouth, several things happened at once. The emergency sprinkler system activated, triggered by Renata in the kitchen below, he would later learn. In the confusion, Jewel bit her captor's hand and ran to Marcus. The administrator, startled by the sprinklers, stumbled backward, and Marcus lunged forward to grab the twins' carriers, just as Detective Chambers and his team burst through the door. In the chaos that followed, as the traffickers were arrested and paramedics checked the children, Marcus held his family close, not caring that they were all soaked from the sprinklers. Jewel clung to him, repeating, "Papa, Papa," while the twins, amazingly, had slept through the entire ordeal. Blossom arrived moments later, wrapping them all in dry blankets. "The news crews are outside," she told him. "Dr. Johnson is safe, she's asking about the children." Marcus nodded, but his attention was on Jewel, who was shivering despite the blanket. "Hey," he said softly, kneeling to meet her eyes, "you were so brave, just like in the kitchen. Remember when something goes wrong, we stay calm and fix it together." Julia managed a small smile, like making pasta. "Exactly, like making pasta." He hugged her close. "We're going to be okay, all of us." As the police processed the scene and his staff worked to clean up the water damage below, Marcus sat with his children in the one dry corner of his apartment. The twins had finally woken up, demanding bottles, and Jewel insisted on helping to feed them, her hands steady despite everything that had happened. Detective Chambers approached, his expression serious but satisfied. "We got them all, the whole network. Dr. Johnson's evidence combined with what we found at the clinic, it's over." But Marcus knew it wasn't quite over. There would be trials, testimonies, and the long process of legally adopting all three children. There would be nights when Jewel woke up screaming from nightmares and days when the twins' cries seemed endless. There would be questions about his ability to balance running a restaurant with raising three young children, yet looking at Jewel humming to the twins, her face peaceful despite their ordeal, Marcus knew that like any complex recipe, the most challenging dishes were often the most rewarding. His restaurant would reopen, his family would heal, and together, they would create something even more special than his finest culinary creations, a home built on love, trust, and the unshakable bond between a father and his children. 6 months later, Marcus's restaurant hummed with a different kind of energy. The dining room had been subtly redesigned to include a small play area in the corner, visible from both the kitchen and his regular table where Jewel often did her homework under Donna's watchful eye. The twins, now crawling and babbling, had a secure space in his office equipped with monitors that let him check on them between cooking shifts. The adoption proceedings were finally nearing completion. Dr. Johnson, fully recovered from her ordeal, had been the star witness in the federal case against the trafficking ring. Her testimony, combined with the evidence she'd gathered, had led to multiple convictions. More importantly, she'd become a regular visitor to the restaurant, sharing stories with Jewel about their time together at the hospital and helping the little girl process her experiences. "She's doing remarkably well," Dr. Reeves, Jewel's child psychologist, told Marcus during their monthly check-in. They sat at his kitchen table, watching Jewel teach Blossom's daughter, Parabella, how to properly swaddle one of her dolls. "Her attachment to you is secure, and her protective instincts toward the twins have evolved from anxiety to healthy big sister behavior." Marcus nodded, thinking of how far they'd come. The nightmares hadn't completely stopped, but they were less frequent now. Jewel no longer felt compelled to check on the twins every few minutes, trusting that they were safe in their new home. She'd started kindergarten last month, and though separation anxiety had been a challenge at first, the school's understanding of her situation and Marcus's flexible schedule had helped ease the transition. "Papa," Jewel called from the living room, "can we show Pella how to make chocolate chip cookies the special way?" The special way had become their code for cooking together, a form of therapy that Dr. Reeves highly encouraged. In the kitchen, Jewel felt most secure, most connected to her new life. Marcus had installed a custom step stool that let her work safely at the counter, and she took pride in being his sous chef at home. "Of course, sweetheart, but remember what we talked about." Julia's face lit up with pride. Safety first, wash hands, tie hair back, and listen to Papa's instructions. As the girls excitedly prepared for their baking session, Blossom joined Marcus at the table. "You know," she said softly, "when you first found them, I thought you were crazy, a single man running a successful restaurant suddenly taking on 3 children." She watched as Jewel carefully helped Pella wash her hands, demonstrating the proper technique she'd learned from her papa, "But now, I can't imagine it any other way." The restaurant had adapted too. Marcus had promoted Renata to co-executive chef, allowing him more flexibility with his schedule. His staff had embraced the changes, often taking turns entertaining the children during slow periods. Regular customers brought books for Jewel and toys for the twins, and the restaurant's private dining room had been converted into a temporary nursery during evening service. The biggest surprise had come from the local restaurant community. What could have been a disaster for his business had instead sparked a movement. Other restaurants had begun implementing family-friendly policies for their staff, and Marcus had been featured in several industry magazines for proving that fine dining and family life weren't mutually exclusive. Later that evening, after the cookies had been baked and shared, after Pella and Blossom had gone home, Marcus sat with his children during their nightly routine. The twins were already asleep in their cribs, proper ones now in a properly decorated nursery, while Jewel snuggled next to him on her bed, her favorite cookbook open on their laps. "Papa," she said thoughtfully, tracing the picture of a complex pastry with her finger, "when I grow up, can I be a chef like you?" Marcus smiled, remembering how far they'd come. "You can be anything you want to be, sweetheart, but you're already something more important than a chef." "What's that?" "You're the best big sister in the world, and the best daughter I could have ever hoped for." Julia was quiet for a moment, then asked the question she'd been holding on to for months, "And we'll always be together, you, me, Daniel, and Louie?" Marcus pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "Always. Some recipes take time to perfect, but when you find the right ingredients, like we did, you never let them go." After Jewel fell asleep, Marcus stood in the doorway of their home, watching his children rest peacefully. The apartment above his restaurant had been transformed, just as his life had been. Where there had once been sleek minimalist decor, there were now toys, children's artwork, and the countless signs of a happy family life. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Antie, "Final adoption hearing scheduled for next month. Everything looks good, those kids are officially yours soon, chef." Marcus smiled, thinking of how wrong the traffickers had been. They had seen these children as commodities, as products to be sold to the highest bidder, but love, like the best recipes, couldn't be bought or sold. It had to be nurtured, developed, and given freely. In the kitchen below, he could hear his night staff preparing for tomorrow's service. The sounds mixed with the gentle breathing of his children and the distant hum of city life outside. This was his symphony now, not just the clatter of pots and pans, but the beautiful chaos of family life. Tomorrow, he would teach Jewel how to make canellas, a recipe that required patience, precision, and love. The twins would watch from their high chairs, probably making a mess with their breakfast. His staff would filter in, bringing energy and laughter to the kitchen, and Marcus would continue perfecting the most important recipe of his life, being a father to 3 amazing children who had transformed his world in ways he never could have imagined. As he finally headed to bed himself, Marcus paused at the twins' room for one last check. In the soft glow of their nightlight, he could see Daniel and Louie sleeping peacefully, their tiny hands occasionally reaching out as if to make sure the other was still there. On their wall hung a framed note, the one he'd found with them that rainy night, now preserved as a reminder of where their journey had begun, but below it hung another frame containing their new family motto, written in Jewel's careful handwriting during a therapy session: "Family is the main ingredient in love's best recipe." Marcus couldn't have said it better himself. The morning of the adoption ceremony dawned bright and clear. Marcus stood in front of his mirror, adjusting his tie while watching the reflection of Jewel twirling in her new blue dress. The twins, now walking and babbling their first words, were attempting to copy their sister's spins, their matching bow ties already slightly askew. "Papa, is Dr. Susan really coming?" Jewel asked, pausing her dance to help Louie regain his balance. "Yes, sweetheart, she wouldn't miss this for anything." Marcus knelt to fix Daniel's tie for the 3rd time, "And Aunt Blossom and Renata and Donna and the whole family?" Julia finished, beaming. The word family no longer carried the weight of uncertainty it once had. Now it was a celebration, a certainty, a promise fulfilled. The courthouse steps were crowded with familiar faces. His entire restaurant staff had closed the kitchen for the morning to attend. Regular customers who had watched the children grow over the past year stood alongside police officers who'd been involved in their case. Detective Chambers, now a close family friend, was entertaining the twins with funny faces while Blossom helped Jewel arrange her dress just so. Dr. Susan Johnson arrived last, having flown in from her new position at a hospital across the country. Her testimony had helped convict the trafficking ringleaders, and she'd since dedicated herself to advocating for adoption reform. But today wasn't about the past, it was about officially recognizing what everyone already knew in their hearts. The adoption ceremony itself was brief but profound. Valeria Davis, who had overseen their case from the beginning, smiled warmly as she addressed the courtroom. Family, she began, comes in many forms. Sometimes it's born, sometimes it's chosen, and sometimes, in the most remarkable cases, it's discovered in moments of providence that remind us that love knows no boundaries. Jewel stood proudly between the twins' strollers, her hand firmly in Marcus's as Valeria continued. When it came time for the official declarations, Jewel's voice rang out clear and strong, "I want to be Julia Antie forever and ever." The twins, not to be outdone, chose that moment to demonstrate their newest word, pointing at Marcus and shouting, "Papa," in unison, causing laughter to ripple through the courtroom. Valeria Davis's eyes twinkled as she made it official. "By the power vested in me by the state of Oregon, I hereby declare these adoptions final and complete. Congratulations to the Antie family." The celebration that followed transformed Marcus's restaurant into something magical. Tables overflowed with a fusion of cuisines representing their multicultural family, Marcus's Chinese-American heritage, dishes inspired by Jewel's African-American background, and new recipes they'd created together as a family. Renata had outdone herself with the cake, a towering masterpiece decorated with fondant kitchen utensils and tiny replicas of the family cooking together. Jewel proudly showed everyone how the bottom tier featured her own pasta rolling design. During the celebration, Dr. Johnson pulled Marcus aside, her eyes bright with emotion. "Do you remember what I told you that day in Pioneer Square about why I chose your restaurant?" Marcus nodded, watching as Jewel helped the twins sample tiny portions of every dish, carefully explaining each flavor just as he taught her. "I said you had a good heart," Dr. Johnson continued, "but it was more than that. I saw how you built not just a restaurant but a community. These children didn't just need a home, they needed a village, and you, Marcus Antie, came with a village already built." The truth of her words was evident in every corner of the celebration. Donna was teaching a group of children, including Blossom's daughter Parabella, how to properly fold napkins into swans. Detective Chambers was sharing stories with some of the officers who'd helped protect the family. Florence Antie was discussing adoption advocacy with Dr. Johnson, their shared passion for reform strengthened by this success story. Later, as the party wound down, Marcus found Jewel in his office, showing the twins their family photo album. She'd insisted